Hey guys, Arm&Gun here today with a rundown on this little cutie, the B&T GHM9 9mm. I think you can also get these guys in 45. But this is the new Gen 2. It's the Shorty K configuration, and this one has the Glock lower. Yes, these are Glock magazines. Voila, pretty darn handy. You guys can just swap the lower out for the one that takes the factory mags. You can actually swap these interchangeably with an APC9 as well. APC being B&T's flagship SMG or PCC, which is a little bit different from this guy. And yes, we'll be talking about some of those differences because there are a number of them, one of which being a significant disparity in the overall price. But we'll get to that and much more in today's video. We're going to cover features, specs, controls. I did shooting separately in a separate video. We'll throw a little bit of that content in here as well. Took this guy out, put quite a few rounds through it, showed you guys how to operate all the controls, what they all do, and had a great old time. This thing ran super well. That's a previous video on my channel. I'll link it up here, or just stick along for the ride. We'll also touch upon some of the design intent behind this guy, because there are some reasons why it's different from the APC, and some of that has to do with the purpose that this thing was built for. Also of note, B&T put out a ton of PCCs kind of all around the same time. And my hunch is, again, something that had to do with the initial APC9 that led to all of these other guys. We'll talk about this gun in Canada as well, because this is a very popular gun up north, and for very good reason. This one's actually supplied by Wolverine Supplies. Big thanks to those guys. They're the distributor for B&T in Canada, and just some really fine people. And then lastly, I'll close with some of my own thoughts, if you haven't already garnered those throughout the course of the video, as well as some of those from my good buddy, Sean Burrows, who's on the B&T competitive shooting team, as he has run both this and the APC9, probably more than anyone else I know, so I definitely trust his feedback. Anyways, guys, buckle in, let's get to looking at this gun. All right, laddies, let's kick things off with a quick run through of the controls. We've got magazine release ambi, we got right there and right here, we're of course clear, and we have bolt hold and release controls on both sides as well. They're basically mirrored. Pull the bolt back, flip this guy up, that retains the bolt, and then drop it over there to let it go. Both controls work both sides. Safety selector is ambidextrous as well. A little bit more minimalistic paddle on this side where there's a full-size one on this guy. The charging handle is ambidextrous as well, or at least it can be moved over to either side, but only one side at a time. And you can also add on the folding charging handles if you like. But this guy is reciprocating because it's attached directly to the bolt. The new Gen 2 APCs have non-reciprocating, but again, we'll touch on that and all the other differences later in the video. And then of course we have a pretty darn slick trigger, a little bit of take up, firm wall. There's a bit of a, you push through a little bit of stuff and then it breaks and there is basically no over travel. Reset is also very audible, more audible than it is tactile, but it's there and overall a very nice trigger. You can run this thing pretty quickly again because of that lack of over travel and the quick reset. Overall, quite nice, definitely a fan. Then your stock. This is the PDW Telestock, which in my opinion, B&T did a fantastic job with this thing. It's really smooth. You need to get your cheek up around here. These are all radiused really nicely, so it doesn't beat you up. Quite nice. Very, very slick and smooth. Compact. Oh, they're pricey, but they did a great job with it. And at least the replacement stocks are cheaper on the GHM9 than the APC9 due to the fact that the buffer, the hydraulic buffer that runs inside this thing, has been moved to the back of the bolt itself rather than the back of the stock assembly. There are some trade-offs there, but it does make these less expensive. For features on this little guy, of course, we covered the full ambidextrous controls. The fact that it has a hydraulic buffer in there. Again, it's a simple blowback gun, but we'll pull a magazine out here and let's show you this here. So you get back, that's the length of the stroke, but then this last half an inch or so, that's you're engaging a hydraulic buffer, and that really dampens the recoil. That makes this thing actually really quite a soft shooter. Softer shooting than any other direct blowback that I've had a chance to play with. With the exception of the APC9, I would say that one's a little bit softer yet. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. This gun is also highly modular, the Gen 2s at least. You can, there's a screw up here and a screw down there. That allows you to pop off the handguard because you can run a bunch of different barrel lengths and handguard lengths, including a really cool SD kit with a ported barrel. That's something I definitely need to get. There are different stock options, though this Tele guy is definitely my favorite. Different lowers again as mentioned. You got the Glock lower, you got the standard lower. They're talking about doing a SIG 320 mag lower as well. And much improved on the Gen 2s is that you can swap out the pistol grip as well. This is true of the new APC9 Pro series as well, kind of the Gen 2s of those. But you can actually get away from that factory, I always found the factory grip a bit too long. This would more or less mimic it, but I found there's an extra like finger there. So I can take this, I can swap this out for a little CQG grip or a Petilia, or if I really want to go heavy with an ergo. Usually I do ergos on my battle rifles though. But now the world is your oyster. You can put whatever AR styled grip you want on there. Beaver tail and all. Specs on this little guy, we're actually at about 2.4 kilograms or 5.3 pounds. That's with no stock. A mag though, a 30 round, I'm assuming a Swiss mag, and the 6.9 inch or 175 millimeter barrel. Now this guy, that's just specs off the site. And again, there's a number of different barrels available. They're cold hammer forged barrels, which are really good, but you have a starting at 4.3 inch, that's this little guy right here, bare muzzle. Then you got a 6.9 inch, that's with the tri-lug and threaded muzzle. Then you have an 8.9 inch barrel and a 16.5 inch barrel. There's also the little shorty for the integrally suppressed, which is cool. It's actually a true integrally suppressed barrel. It's a ported barrel, so it does take supersonic ammunition and drops it down to subsonic. That's a little 4.3, and then you throw your cano on there underneath the SD handguard, and that is an incredibly cool little package. All right, guys, design detail on the GHM9. Why did they build this gun? What was the purpose behind it? Well, for that, we have to talk about the name itself. I've noticed actually watching some videos in preparation for this video, a lot of guys talk about this. You probably already are aware that GHM9 stands for Grasshopper Mouse. That was a very intentional marketing choice on B&T's part, because this gun they wanted to offer as a lower cost alternative to their flagship APC series to compete with the CZ Evo 3 Scorpion. And what eats scorpions? Grasshopper mice do, hence the name. That stands for literally Grasshopper Mouse. There's actually a little caricature underneath here, I'll show you guys in a second, of a mouse eating a scorpion. Pretty cool little thing. I don't know that I could do a video without mentioning that. Anyways, fun time. This does still cost more than an Evo 3, but this is a lot. You get a lot of gun for the money on this thing. You pay more for the APC-9, but this is the value-packed offering, in my opinion. You don't give up a lot. You give up a couple things. Again, we'll talk about that, but you do get a lot. And you get some bonuses that the APC doesn't offer as well. But again, so the point of this thing was actually largely for a commercial market. Now the APC actually stands for Advanced Police Carbine, and it was totally intended for a law enforcement and military market. This guy was intended for a commercial market, i.e. civilians like you and I. There are actually a lot of guns that kind of all came out around the same time from B&T. There were like these 9mm pistol caliber carbines. There's the GHM9 was another one. There was a modern take on the Tech 9 type thing. My understanding for that was that Carl Brugger, who is the B in B&T, was a big fan of those 80s SMGs and kind of wanted to do a modern take on them with Swiss quality. And that he did, and they are pretty fantastic. I should have a GH9 coming actually in not too long. That being the remake of the Sights Spectre, which is just a really, really cool gun. But I believe, now this is speculation on my part, but I believe why they put so many out, the APC-9 came first. They put a lot of engineering and design time into development into that gun. And I think they actually found out a lot of great ways and efficiencies. They benefited from all that engineering in terms of making a little tight SMG. So I think it was therefore easy for them to leapfrog that technology and know-how into a bunch of pretty similar platforms. So again, speculation on my part, but I think that's kind of why they did that. That was an easy excuse for Carl to realize what I can only imagine was a passion of recreating all those 80s submachine guns. And again, probably fairly cost-effective and economical to do, thanks to the groundwork laid by the APC. And that leads me to actually the best reason that I've heard to date as to why the APC-9 costs so much more than the GHM9, and that is because the APC-9 bore the brunt of the development costs, and then that's where they got attributed to. The other subsequent models benefited from much less needed engineering time. By the way, if I haven't mentioned, this is a Q muzzle device up here. It's a whistle tip on top of a cherry bomb, and it is a fantastic little device. Really dig it. Alrighty guys, 2 more segments on this little guy before we close. This one is now on the GHM9 in Canada. For those of you out there familiar with Canadian gun laws, this gun falls into the restricted and non-restricted category, which means it was classified based on barrel length alone. That means our boys at the labs decided that this thing was hard enough to convert to full auto that it could be allowed to us masses and would only be restricted based on its barrel length. Basically, its ability to be concealed. So as long as this thing has an 18.6 inch or longer barrel, it remains non-restricted. And for you Canucks out there, this is actually a gun that works in your favor with that because of its modularity. It's got a user-changeable barrel and handguard, so you guys can get this gun and then add on a non-restricted length barrel if you want, have it verified as non-restricted, and you get to ditch that restricted classification and run around with this guy out in the bush Again, with these Glock lowers, you can run Glock magazines as well, which are considered pistol magazines, and you get the full 10 rounds. Whereas otherwise, like a lot of these things come into the States as pistols, in Canada they're treated as rifles. And with our magazine limits, rifles are subjected to 5 rounds only, unless they somehow take a pistol mag, which, ta-da. So there you go, guys. Non-restricted options, pretty darn cool. I think the LASK was doing those for a while there as well. But honestly, for me, this little shorty K configuration is honestly where it's at. This thing is so dang sexy and smooth and compact. This is as compact as you can get a GHM9. The APC9K Pros are a little bit smaller yet, but man, this thing is sweet. So again, as mentioned in the beginning, Wolverine Supplies is the Canadian distributor for B&T, but you can also get it from them directly as well. All right, guys, GHM9 versus APC9. What are the differences? Well, the APC9 came first, again, as I mentioned before. It's B&T's flagship model, and it is a fair bit more expensive. The APC9 also shares cross-compatibility with the APC223 or 556, 300, and 308. They share common stock assemblies. The buffers inside will differ depending on what caliber you're using, so to be careful with those. They are quite easy to swap out yourself if you need to. They're also a singular unibody receiver, which makes them extra stiff and rigid, and again, more durable for law enforcement, military application. Now, apart from that cross-compatibility or modularity with the other family of APC firearms, visually very distinctive is the taller receiver. Well, that taller receiver does two things. It allows you to get a more compact stock assembly, which helps reduce the size, and it allows you to get the necessary mass of a bolt, which is an important aspect when you're using simple blowback actions on a PCC like this. You can make that bolt taller. Therefore, you get that mass, instead of it being so long, like the GHM9 has quite a long, narrow bolt. The APC's is a little more chonk, a little more dimensionally just like a little brick. So that, again, allows you, you're going taller, but you're also going more compact. You're shaving off valuable inches from the back end of the receiver. So as tiny and compact as this cute little shorty GHM9 is, it'll never quite be as compact as, like, for example, the new APC9K Pro, which is just, I got a chance to handle one of those at Wolverine Supplies, man, just about 2 years ago now. It's crazy how much time has passed with all this craziness, but yeah, I couldn't believe it. I fell in love with that as well. It's just such a compact little gun, truly compact, subcompact. Actually, that was the military weapons trial at run was the SCW contract, the subcompact weapon, and boy, it's just that. The taller receiver also allowed them the provision to do non-reciprocating charging handles, which is a quite nice upgrade to the Gen 2s or the Pro models of the APCs. Still waiting for that tech to come over to the APC 223 line though. Definitely looking forward to that when it does. And then the other major difference is that the buffer, the hydraulic buffer, is built into the stock assembly rather than the back of the bolt. Again, that's taking mass off the bolt that kind of doesn't need to be there, unless B&T's optimized it to account for the mass of the buffer in the GHM9 as making up some of that mass. Maybe it does. I've heard the argument that it does get more mass off the bolt, and therefore you have less reciprocating mass in the APC9, and that'll give you less recoil. Also, that the buffer itself is a little beefier because, again, you've got more room to work with in the stock than on the back of the bolt, so that also contributes to a lighter overall recoil. Now, I can't actually verify that unless I had an APC9 here as well, so I could physically weigh the bolts and compare them. Hopefully, I'll have an APC back here soon. I got to play with APC9 a little while ago on loan from Wolverine Supplies, but sadly, I had to send that one back. So hopefully, we can get something here on a more permanent basis in the future, and we can do a nice head-to-head showdown of these two guys. Now, I asked my buddy Sean Burrows, the B&T competition shooter, what his thoughts on this little guy were relative to the APC9, because again, he's got more trigger time on the both of them and the rest of B&T's APC lineup than anybody else I know. And according to him, both the GHM9 and the APC9 are both just fantastic, soft, smooth shooting little beauties, and he is quite in love with them. He's pretty proficient shooter as well. If you don't know him, go check him out, Sean Burrows or Sean Go Boom on Instagram. He's a fantastic dude, and he even took my wife out for supper when she was working in the desert in Utah. And he was a gentleman about it. So, Sean, to you, my thanks. And finally, what are my thoughts of this little guy? Well, to be honest, this is a loaner from Wolverine Supplies, and I don't feel like sending it back. This thing is a ton of fun. I was actually pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed this thing on the range. I did have a GHM9 when they first came to Canada, the original Gen 1 models. I quickly sold it when I realized there was going to be a Gen 2. It took a little time to get here, but it's here now, and man, there is a huge difference between the Gen 1 and the Gen 2. If you've only ever tried a Gen 1, definitely do yourself a favor, get your hands on a Gen 2, because now all this extra modularity, and again, the price is still largely where it used to be, apart from the craziness and all. But this gun, this is your value add. This is a phenomenal value package from the Swiss guys, and it's still got all the same build quality of the APC9 series. This was just meant to be more of a production scale commercial gun, but they still did a fantastic job with it. And I think this thing does shine as a modular package that really gave this thing a purpose. I think this thing could be a lot of different guns to an end consumer. With that said, I still have an APC9K Pro very high on my list. Was super impressed by just how compact it was. And again, I'm a sucker for now reciprocating folding charging handles, so that'll definitely have to be here sooner rather than later. And again, for those discerning collectors out there, the APC Pro line, the APC9 Pro, and the GHM9 Gen 2, their lowers are interchangeable. So buy a GHM9 with the Glock lower and an APC9 Pro with the Swiss lower or whatever, and you guys can mix and match and don't have to buy extra parts. That's my frugal tip for you on this fine day. Anyways, guys, with that, I'll bid you adieu. Check out my other channel, Arm&Armory. I decided to split up my channel and have a kind of a B channel or a more technical channel to put disassemblies, field strips, build videos, more intensive like barrel swaps, things like that. That's going to be on that channel. So starting from scratch, but if you'd like to go check it out there. We'll have the disassembly up on this little guy over the weekend here, so you guys can see me pull that apart and talk about the internals in greater detail there. Thanks a ton, guys. Arm&Gun out.